Wasn't 12:40 yet. All right. Good afternoon. This Township of Selwyn Committee of Adjustment meeting will come to order for Tuesday, April the 25th, 2023. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of the committee, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the intranet. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we will go to Brandy to advise what the purpose is of this meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Committee of Adjustment is holding a public hearing in accordance with Section 45 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, in order to consider applications for relief from bylaw 2009-21, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Township of Selwyn. The prescribed notices of the public meeting were provided by first-class mail to all residents within a 60-meter radius of the subject properties. Ministries and agencies were circulated via email. The subject properties were posted with a sign advertising the public hearing, and the notices were also available on the Township of Selwyn's website. The notice of circulation complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. If a specified person or a public body does not make an oral submission at the public hearing or make written submissions to the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn before the variance is granted, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn on the proposed minor variances, you must make written requests to the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn, either by fax, email, or Dropbox. The first application on the agenda is application number A1123 for the property at 1165 Connaught Drive. The application seeks relief to reduce the minimum high water setback from 30 meters to approximately 21.01 meters to a covered deck, to increase the maximum total lot coverage from 20% to approximately 23.81%, and to reduce the interior side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.69 meters to a covered deck. This is in order to permit the newly constructed 273 square foot covered deck. We found that this application meets the 4 tests of the minor variance and recommend it for approval. We have received agency comments from Peterborough Public Health advising that they have no objection to the application. Comments were also received from Hiawatha First Nation, advising they have no concern with the application, as well as the Autonomy Region Conservation Authority has submitted comments that an ORCA permit will be required for this project. No additional agency comments or public comments were received for this application.
Thank you very much. I understand the owners are here, Michael and Beverly Harrington. Is there anything you wish to add to this report? Thank you. And Deputy Clerk, was there anyone that had registered to speak in opposition to this application?
Madam Chair, there's no one else here for this application.
All right, I'll bring it to committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to A1223, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A1223 is for the property at 3580 Horseshoe Lane. The application seeks relief to reduce the minimum high water setback from 30 meters to approximately 5.9 meters to a new open deck. To reduce the minimum high water setback from 30 meters to approximately 8.2 meters to a dwelling in order to permit a dwelling addition on the front foyer section. To reduce the minimum front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 6.13 meters from a right-of-way to a dwelling addition on the front. As well, to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 4.34 meters from a right-of-way to an open deck. This is in order to permit an approximate 831.3 square foot of new open decks, including stairs, and a new 101.2 square foot dwelling addition, which is the front foyer. We did find that this application, this does meet the requirements for tests of minor variance and do recommend it for approval. We received agency comments from Peterborough Public Health advising that an existing sewage system review will be required. Hiawatha First Nation submitted comments of no concern. And the Otonabee Region Conservation Authority has submitted comments that an ORCA permit will be required as well. No additional agency or public comments were received for this application.
All right, thank you very much. And I understand that the agent, Dennis Jenkins, is on the line. Is there anything you wish to add, Mr. Jenkins, to this report?
No, there is not.
Thank you very much. And the owner, Paul Tigert, is also on the line. Is there anything you wish to add, sir?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
Thank you. Did anyone register to be in opposition to this?
There's no one else here for this application.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll bring it to committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to A1323, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Application number A1323 is for the property at 2544 Fire Route 37. The application seeks relief to reduce the minimum high water setback from 30 meters to approximately 8 meters to a dwelling in order to permit a roof addition over an existing deck for the purpose of a front porch. I said this is in order to permit a 177.6 square foot roof addition over an existing deck. We found that this application does meet the 4 tests of minor variance and recommend it for approval. We did receive agency comments from Peterborough Public Health advising that an existing sewage system review is needed. Hiawatha First Nation has submitted comments of no concern. As well, the Otonabee Region Conservation Authority has submitted comments that ORCA permit is required and that ORCA is in support of the minor variance provided the covered roof addition is not enclosed to create a habitable interior space. No other agency comments or public comments were received for this application.
Thank you. I understand that the agent, Ian Nichols, is on the line. Is there anything you wish to add to this report, sir?
Nope.
Thank you. And did anyone apply to register in opposition?
No one else here for this application, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve these applications. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We are moving on to the minutes Committee of Adjustment meeting of March the 28th, 2023. Can I have someone move those, please? Councillor Boyko, seconded by Councillor Koulis. All in favor? That is carried. And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor. That's carried. Our next meeting is May the 23rd, 2023. Our council meeting will commence at 1 o'clock. Thank you. We have to wait till 1. Oh, okay. This council meeting for the Township of Selwyn for Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 will come to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Please observe a moment of silence with us so that council, staff, and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, please note that in the minutes. We have our minutes of the meeting of April the 11th, 2023. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt them? Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Koulis. All in favor? That is carried. Is there any discussion out of the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to our first deputation. We have from Watson and Associates economists to give us an update on development charges. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to present council with an update regarding the development charges background study that's currently underway. So by way of a little bit of background. We could go forward a slide. Just by way of background in terms of what development charges are really all about. So the purpose of development charges is to help municipalities recover the costs associated with expanding services to accommodate additional residential and non-residential growth within a municipality. The costs that are recovered through the development charges mechanism are in addition to the costs that would typically be constructively reckoned by developers as part of the subdivision agreement process. So these are typically broader servicing needs and expansions needed to provide additional service and capacity within the municipality. Municipalities are empowered to impose these charges via the Development Charges Act, which has gone through several amendments since the township last undertook its development charges background study. So that's something we're touching on in the presentation today in terms of the implications that that will have on the process moving forward. We could go to the next slide, please. So the township currently imposes development charges via bylaw 2018-044. That bylaw was adopted in June of 2018 and became effective on September 11th of the same year. Shown on the slide here is a summary of the charges or development charge rates that are currently in effect. These are somewhat different than what's shown in the bylaw because the township has an ongoing practice of indexing these charges annually to keep pace with inflationary pressures, and something that's allowed under the Development Charges Act. So what we're showing here is just a full schedule of charges broken down by service. We'll touch on the different services that are included within the township's development charge in just a little bit. What is also shown in the table here is that the charges are differentiated by type of unit. So there's a different charge for single detached homes, for example, and a different charge for apartment units. The reason that there are different charges for different types of units is to reflect the different average occupancy levels associated with those unit types, and therefore there being different service demands that different types of units place on municipal infrastructure. Given that the existing bylaw became effective on September 11th of 2018, under the legislation at the time, development charges had a maximum shelf life of 5 years. So that bylaw will expire on September 11th of this year. And in order for the township to keep collecting development charges beyond that point, a new development charge bylaw will need to be approved by council. And that needs to be preceded by a formal development charges background study. And there's also an associated public process to go with that. So for example, as part of that public process, the development charges background study has to be published and made publicly available at least 60 days prior to council considering approval of a new development charges bylaw. And then there's also at least one public meeting that has to be held as part of that public process as well. And so the township has retained the services of our firm, Watson Associates Economists, to assist with the preparation of the new development charges background study. And so that we can present a new bylaw for council's consideration as we work towards September. We can move to the next slide, please. So there have been, as I mentioned earlier, several legislative changes that have occurred to the Development Charges Act since the township undertook its last development charges background study, which was back in 2018. The amount of change we have seen is the most in a fairly compact period of time than we've seen prior to that period. The first three bills or acts that are shown on this illustration here provided several changes, which firstly fundamentally reframes the Development Charges Act from or the context of the Development Charges Act from a tool that was used to fund services that are not defined as ineligible to only being able to use it as a tool to fund services that are explicitly identified as being eligible under the Development Charges Act. The first three legislative changes also introduce some changes to how the development charges are calculated for different types of developments. So previously, generally development charges were calculated and became payable at building permit issuance. Moving forward for developments that proceed through either a site plan or a zoning bylaw amendments, those development charges are calculated at the rates that were in effect when that planning application was first submitted. So there can be quite a long period of time between when that planning application is submitted and when the development charges ultimately become payable. So that's something that the province introduced. And they also introduced a installment payment mechanism, whereby for certain types of development, such as rental housing and institutional development, they are paying development charges over 6 annual installments instead of those charges becoming payable immediately upon building issuance. So that potentially causes some cash flow issues for municipalities that are associated with that. To address that, at least to some extent, the province has allowed municipalities to charge interest on both the installment payments as well as that fees and fees related to those two different types of planning applications. And then finally, those first three pieces of legislation introduced some additional exemptions for additional accessory dwelling units that are created on existing lots, which are fully exempt from development charges as well. So moving forward, Bill 2213 wasn't an amendment to the Development Charges Act directly, but to the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities Act, which introduced an additional statutory exemption from the payment of development charges for universities. Bill 109, shown on the slide here, introduced some administrative changes to the annual reports that have to be issued pertaining to the administration of development charge reserve funds. And then the final piece, Bill 23, introduced that's very recent, just at the end of last year, introduced quite a number of significant changes to the Development Charges Act itself. So firstly, municipalities moving forward will be required to phase in any new development charge bylaws and associated rates over a period of 5 years. So there's an ability to start charging the full calculated charge right away, but there's a 5-year phase-in period that has to be observed in each case. There have been additional exemptions that have been introduced for affordable housing as well as attainable housing units, although those haven't fully been defined as of yet. We're waiting for some regulations around that. Bill 23 also introduced discounts from the development charge rates for rental housing units based on the number of bedrooms within those units. So that will result in further revenue reductions from the development charge stream for municipalities as well. Importantly, Bill 23 removed growth-related studies from the list of eligible capital costs. So previous to those changes, municipalities were able to fund things like master plans, servicing plans, the development charges study itself from these charges, given that they were growth related, that ability has been removed with the introduction of Bill 23. Bill 23 also resulted in housing being removed as an eligible service. It introduced caps on the amount of interest that municipalities can charge on development charge installment payments, as well as that freeze that I referred to earlier. They extended the amount of historical service standard measurements that we have to look at for the study process from 10 to 15 years. And I'll come back to that in just a little bit. And one of the other changes that they introduced is extending the shelf life of development charge bylaws from 5 to 10 years. So potentially, for some of the services moving forward, once we go through this process, there won't necessarily be updates needed for up to 10 years. So those are some of the key legislative changes that have occurred since the last background study was prepared for the township. So these are all things that we will be incorporating and recognizing within the study process as we move ahead with this. We could go to the next slide, please. So the Development Charges Act is quite prescriptive in terms of the process that municipalities must follow when establishing a development charge bylaw. And the bylaws themselves are appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a period of 40 days after if they come into effect. So it is important that the methodology is robust and defensible. And so what we have on the slide here is a illustration that provides a very high level overview of the development charge calculation process. So at the very top, we start with identifying the anticipated amount, type, location of growth within a municipality, looking at both the amount of residential growth as well as non-residential growth that is anticipated for the municipality. Relative to that growth, then we are looking at where and which service areas additional capacity would need to be created in order for the township to maintain service levels as that population grows. And then as we identify where that additional capacity would need to be created, we're then looking at specific projects that would need to be undertaken by the municipality to ensure that those service demands are met, and then the associated costs. Now, as shown with the rectangle to the right of the illustration at the top, those future increases in need for service and associated costs have to be measured relative or against the historical level of service that's been provided within the municipality over the past 15 years. And that level of service measurement requirement is there to ensure that development charges are not used as a mechanism to increase or improve the level of service that's being provided. They are really intended to be a mechanism to allow municipalities to maintain a consistent level of service even as the population grows. So that's why that test there is required. And there also needs to be an expression of council that these increased needs for service will in fact be met. So those expressions are typically obtained through things like previously completed master plans and servicing studies, as well as the previous development charge studies themselves. So once we have a good handle on what this increase in need for services looks like and the associated projects and costs that would need to be completed, there are a few deductions that we have to observe. So firstly, to the extent there are any grants, subsidies, or other external contributions that the township is expecting that could be used to offset some of those capital costs, we have to recognize those in the calculation of the charge, as well as any of these projects to the extent that they would benefit the existing development. So provide an increase in the level of service or replacement of something that was already there. That benefit to existing development has to be recognized within the calculation itself. So that brings us to the very bottom, where we end up with the identification of what these development charge recoverable costs would be in order to accommodate growth. And then we're dividing those costs by the total amount of development that's anticipated for the municipality. And that results in charges on a per unit basis, typically for residential developments. I think we looked at with the township's current schedule of charges, where those charges are typically differentiated by type of unit. And then for non-residential development, typically the charge is expressed as a charge per unit of gross floor area, so per square foot or per square meter. So that in a nutshell, is the calculation of the charge. We could go to the next slide, please. In terms of the growth forecast, we're currently in the process of finalizing that in consultation with township staff. The forecast that's being developed is being based on the County of Peterborough Growth Analysis Report, which was completed last year, as well as ongoing discussions about land supply, land availability, as well as any developments that are in the current in the pipeline in terms of being active development applications. So taking all of that into account in developing the growth forecast. The growth forecast is being prepared for 3 distinct time periods. That is being prepared for a 10-year planning horizon, so to 2033, as well as a 28-year planning horizon to 2051, because that's as far as the county's growth analysis report takes us. And then for the Lakefield South plans, where there's an area-specific development charge that applies to those lands, given some of the unique servicing requirements within there, we're looking at the full build-out of those lands to identify what the charges will be, because the servicing needs for that area have been really defined for the full build-out of the area. So that's why we're looking at it in that regard. We can go to the next slide, please. So what we have listed on the next slide here is a full list of the services that are eligible for inclusion in development charges as defined within the Development Charges Act. What we have indicated with the teal color are services that are currently included in the township's development charge. So these are things like water, wastewater, and stormwater, at least within the Lakefield South area-specific development charge. We have services related to highways and roads and related items, which are both in the area-specific charge for Lakefield South plans, as well as in the township-wide portion of the charge. Then we have services like fire, library, and parks and recreation. In addition to those services that are currently included, the orange highlighting indicates a few additional services that we are currently reviewing with township staff to see whether there are any growth-related service demands that exist within those areas and any investments that would need to be made to ensure that that level of service is maintained into the future. So that's something we're exploring, and you might see some new services as we move ahead with this process. And then last but not least, below the line on the right-hand side of the slide, we have the growth-related studies, which are highlighted red because that's, as I mentioned earlier, no longer an eligible cost, but something that has been included in the township's development charges historically. So unfortunately, that will have to be removed moving forward. We can go to the next slide, please. So just a few notes here about the capital costs that are eligible for inclusion in the development charge. So these would be within any of the eligible services. We can include the capital costs related to acquisition of land, with one exception, which I'll get to shortly. Any costs related to improving land, acquisition, leases, or constructions or improvements to buildings, acquisitions of equipment or rolling stocks of fleet items, and then also capital components of any leases related to these capital items as well. In addition to those, we can also include circulation materials for libraries, even those may not be considered capital from a budgeting perspective, as well as any interest on money any borrowing that needs to be undertaken to pay for any of these additional needs. With the latest amendments to the Development Charges Act, we can look at any planning horizon for any of these services and capital needs, whereas previously we were restricted to a 10-year planning horizon for the softer services like parks and recreation and library. We can take a longer term view now, with the exception of transit, which is still limited to 10 years. As I mentioned earlier, the capital costs that we do identify have to be reduced by grants that are expected, and then we can also include any costs that others will incur on behalf of the municipality in servicing growth. We can go to the next slide, please. A few notable exclusions from the list of eligible capital costs. So we cannot include in the development charge the cost related to acquisition of land for parks, because that's captured under the provisions of the Planning Act. We can, however, include any costs related to the improvement of that land to an active park state. So any amenities that you're replacing on those lands of that nature can be included, just not the acquisition of the land itself. We also can't include any vehicles that have an estimated useful life of less than 7 years. We generally cannot include computer equipment unless it's integral to the delivery of a service, such as the laptops that are in ambulance vehicles or police vehicles. Those are integral to the vehicle itself, but generally computer equipment is not an eligible cost. As I mentioned earlier, studies are now ineligible as well. And then the province has, in some of the amendments brought about by Bill 23, also indicated that the acquisition of land or services other than parkland may be excluded in the future as well. So for now, they've left it all in, but they can via regulations prescribe other services for which the acquisition of land will become an ineligible cost under the development charges act. We can go to the next slide, please. So beyond the capital costs and then the calculation of the development charge itself, there are several policy areas that are being reviewed through the study process as well. These include the local service policy. So recognizing that some of the need for services generated by additional development consists of local services that are related to a plan of subdivision. There needs to be a policy that clearly identifies what would be included in a development charge versus what is expected to be direct developer responsibility. So that policy has been included in the township's prior background studies, and just something that's being reviewed through this process. We also have to look at the applicability of the development charge, whether it's something that's imposed on a wide basis or area specific basis, where so far it looks like the historical practice of having a township-wide development charge and also maintaining an area-specific charge for the Lakefield South land scoping. We then also are looking at various exemptions. So municipalities do have the discretion to include various exemptions or reductions from the fully calculated charge for different types of developments. So that's where we're going to be looking at the existing list of discretionary exemptions within the township's bylaw and seeing whether those are still all applicable and should be carried forward. We're going to be looking at the redevelopment credits, which recognize where the building is being demolished or repurposed, that we're recognizing a credit against the development charges that would otherwise be payable, to recognize that there was some service capacity that already existed on the site. We're going to be looking at the indexation policies. Currently, the practice is to adjust the township's development charges once a year, and that's on the anniversary date of bylaw passage. So we can look at other options there in terms of making that January 1st, for example, potentially adjusting it more than just once a year, things of that nature. And then last but not least, we're also going to be looking at policy relating to charging of interest on the installment payments, as well as on the development charge freeze that we referenced earlier, as this is not something that's in the township's current bylaw because it was introduced since that bylaw was put into effect. So then on the last slide here is just a high-level overview of the overall project timeline. There are just a few things I'd like to highlight here. We have gone through, as I mentioned earlier, developing the growth forecast. We're currently finalizing that. We have undertaken staff interviews to try to understand what those growth-related servicing needs are. And we're now in the process of starting to undertake the development charge calculations. We are expecting to review those with staff around mid to late May, at which point, if it's apparent that the change in the charges might be significant, there's an optional industry stakeholder consultation meeting that might take place at the end of the month. And then we will be releasing the background study on June 9th. That's the final report at the bottom there. We are planning to undertake the statutory public meeting on June 27th, and then that would put council in a position to consider approval of the new development charges bylaw on August 8th, which will be in advance of the expiry of the existing bylaw, which is September 11th. And again, the key constraint on the timeline is the fact that we do need to get that study published at least 60 days prior to the bylaw coming in front of council. So that's the update on the study. I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you very much for your presentation and the crash course on development charges. Before I go to my colleagues, our MPP has let us know that they expect 2 more bills coming forward to do with housing. There's no date or time as to when they will appear, but they may affect the work you're doing now. So how do you deal with that?
We always need to stay abreast of any legislative changes that are happening, even at the pace that they have in the most recent past. So we will continue to monitor that. If there are any changes to policies or anything that would impact the calculation of the charge, we'll ensure that that's reflected in the study process, or if it's something that maybe isn't fully fleshed out as we complete the study, then there's a process in place to review and update in the coming years.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Thanks for the presentation. It was a great warm up to the final report. So appreciate that. One of your slides talked about eligible costs, and transit, policing, and fire were included in that. And you went on to talk about what would be so I'm assuming, again, that's nothing to do with operating cost increases as a result of the municipality growing. And you talked about within transit, our vehicles are only 7 years. So typically our fire trucks last 25 years. Would a fire truck be eligible for to be purchased? We need an additional, say we start having 5-story buildings and we need a ladder truck, which we don't have. Would it be eligible? Would we be able to use those charges to buy a fire truck, for instance? Or in our transit situation, a bus that would have a 10-year life cycle, maybe. Are those capital costs eligible for?
Yes,
charges?
they would be. Both of those examples would be. The restriction is that we cannot include vehicles that have a useful life of less than 7 years. So those are not eligible, but like the example of the fire truck, that is something that we commonly see included in development charges, as well as with potential transit expansion. As we understand it, there's a pilot project that's currently underway. So through our preliminary discussions, it might be a little premature at this point to see what those growth related needs will be, but at least it is something that we're reviewing through this process, and maybe that's more something for the next update, but certainly those would be eligible costs.
Thank you.
Councillor Boyko.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Could we go back to the slide that talks about development charges eligible services? I have a question about that I think I understand, but I want to make sure I do. Yeah. So could you explain this again? Everything that is in blue, we can consider with respect to developing sorry, I shouldn't have used the word developing, when we can create our new development charge, but things that are in black, we cannot consider when establishing our new development charges. Is that what you said?
Slightly different. So what
Okay.
this list on the slide here represents all of the services that the township could consider including in the development charge.
Yes.
What is highlighted are with the teal color are services that are currently included already. So we would be carrying those forward into the new development charge bylaw and calculation.
Yes.
And then the orange highlighting indicates ones that we identified with discussions with staff as needing to look at more closely. They haven't historically been included, but we've been looking at whether there are any growth related pressures that exist within those respective services and potentially to be included in the next development charge bylaw. And then the black ones are just ones that we did identify through discussion with staff as either being relevant, such as the airports and things like that, or where there aren't expected to be any growth related needs that would be township responsibility at this point in time.
Well, in that case, why is policing black?
So that is something we can certainly take away and see if there would be any growth related capital needs within that area that the township will be responsible for, and we can.
Well, because it seems to me that if Lakefield South, for example, which is a area specific for development charges, if there's going to be 966 residences there eventually, we're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 people possibly. That is going to necessitate more policing, will it not?
It likely would, yes. So it is something certainly we can take away and explore with staff.
Right. And possibly more long-term care with given what some of those properties in Lakefield South are going to be used for as well. And certainly if we've got another 2,000 or 3,000 people, we're going to be talking about increased needs on our public health and childcare in early years as well, are we not?
Yes, so we can certainly take that away and revisit those areas. Again, what we've done is a preliminary assessment through discussions as to which of these areas, the township would have some growth related costs with respect to, on the capital side that would be eligible for development charges, and nothing immediately came up for those specific areas, but certainly something we can take away and revisit.
Right. And if Lakefield South puts another 2,000 or 3,000 people there eventually, when it is all complete, then we are going to be putting more people on the county roads, both going in and out of Peterborough and north on County Road 29, which is going to bring more provincial offenses. So shouldn't that be considered as well?
We can certainly, and I'll be, when we come back to council, we'll be able to provide some comments around each of those service areas, the ones that haven't been included, as to why there were no role related identified within them. So I'll certainly note that, and we'll bring that back in front of council.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Henry?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. I definitely echo Councillor Boyko's questions and concerns here. Bill 23 has definitely put all of us into a tumultuous situation. And on top of that, I want to say, well, long-term care, we already are the second concentrations of seniors in Canada. There's a whole bunch more of us coming real quick. So I would want that to be looked at. However, I do want to bring it to attention that we are running about 12 minutes over time right now. Is it possible that we receive a copy of this? Because I think I could probably do this all afternoon. And I would like more time to go through it and maybe send direct emails to get some feedback.
Yes, absolutely. We could share the presentation slides with council, and happy to address the questions that might come after your.
Thank you.
Councillor Koulis?
I know you look specifically at Selwyn for this, but do you do any comparison with like communities around here, especially with all the changes coming down from the province?
Yes, that is something that we'll be bringing forward as part of the public meeting process. Once we calculate the charges that you could impose, and we start discussing the policies, an important part of that typically is understanding what the surrounding municipalities are doing as well. So that comparison will be provided within the presentation materials, certainly.
All right, thank you. There are no further questions, so thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm looking for a motion to receive it. Deputy Mayor Black, Councillor Boyko, all in favor? That's carried. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We are now into question period. Is there any questions from the public at this time? Do we have anything that has come in online, Deputy Clerk?
No, we don't.
Oh, thank you, Clerk, Madam Clerk, sorry. All right, we will now move on to municipal officers and staff reports. And Lane, you are going to be speaking to us about the Lakefield Water and Sewer budget.
Sure. Through you, Madam Mayor. So this is a joint report from Public Works. Adam and Alex definitely provided support for the report. And so I'll go through some of the highlights of the general report and any of the financial aspects. And if there's any detailed questions about some of the capital works or things like that, Adam's on side here to jump in. Generally, the report is presented and the budget very similar to the budget that we brought forward last year. The increased rates from Peterborough Utilities, 3% in terms of their contract amount. That contract is part of the operations section of the report, but there's really 4 components of each of the sections. So there's administrative costs, operations costs, capital works, and then transfers. And so the PUS agreement is kind of part of that operations bundle, if you will. And so the magnitude of that 3% increase is a little bit different than the overall increase of both of the budgets combined. But the increase as proposed would come in mid-year. So we actually have a good comparator to last year's when we brought it in July 1st as well. So when we take a look at that 1%. So that's what's being proposed in the budget. Over and above the PUS agreement and those costs, there are call-out charges, various operational contingencies to come forward, like water main breaks and things like that as well, and that's built into the budget as well. And we do have a very aggressive capital investment again this year in our system. We're fortunate that we had ISIP grants, which is a federal provincial municipal partnership. It's definitely in place for some of our design works on Strickland Street. And also as outlined in the capital worksheets, you'll see that quite a bit of funding coming in there for our water treatment plan as well. So very fortunate to have that grant, and a lot of work went into that with Adam and Megan on Angie's team to actually secure that grant earlier. It's a multi-year grant that I think probably five years or something like that. So we started it on design work, did a little bit of work at the water treatment plant this year, and then we'll carry on into Strickland Street, and then ultimately bringing our standpipe up on Strickland Street back online as well. The budget overall then proposes a 1% increase in rates effective in the July billing of this year. So that's on the average flat rate bill, that's $1.20 per month. And so just kind of high level, when you take a look at $1.20 a month and roughly 1,400 flat rate customers, 12 months, that really only raises about $20,000. But the base contract amount increasing by 3%, it only goes up about $21,000. So we're staying abreast of that POS increase in cost. And then where we have the flexibility is in some of these other areas. So in some of the operations areas, capital, and then our transfers as well. So as I mentioned at the very start, I think the budget we're putting forward this year is very similar to last year's budget. Not a lot of concern in terms of the general operations area or anything like that. And we are drawing definitely on reserves, fairly heavily in water this year in particular, but we're basically matching the federal and provincial grants that we're able to use there as well. That's kind of a high level overview. If council has any questions, either myself or Adam should be able to field those.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Lane? Councillor Boyko.
Thank you very much for the reports, Adam and Lane. I think they're terrific, the amount of detail that went into them. The people of Lakefield understand a couple of things. I think one is that they are on a user pay system, so nobody else in Selwyn is paying for the water and sewer services that the people of Lakefield have. The people of Lakefield also understand that they are paying what many people believe is a very high rate. And I think many people in Lakefield understand that in order to meet the provincial standards for safety and for efficiency of the system, we need to meet the same standards as would be met in a system of 20, 50, 100, 200,000 people. And so we don't have the benefit of economy of scale, which is part of the reason why the water and sewer rate, when they compare with other communities, appears to be high, because it is for that part of that reason. So a question that I have, Lane, is that we know that there is a cost every year to operations. And if I could put the other parts of the costs that are all going up, there's a cost of parts, the new generators, which I think are really important, given that we're always seem to be suffering power outages. And with what we learned in the Directo last May, there could be even more. And so we need these bigger and more powerful generators to make sure that we can continue to operate the system. There are projects, and you mentioned a couple of them, Water Street completion, that is going to be very expensive, and looking at Strickland Street next year with to address a number of the water main breaks that have been happening recently. We only pay 27% of that because the federal and provincial kick in. But still 27% of the cost of the Water Street project and the upcoming one is substantial. And so that's parts and projects. The third P is price, and that is the 3% increase that the Peterborough Utilities is increasing the charge for operating and managing our system. So my question then, with all of that premise, is with all of these expenditures of parts and projects and price, and the 3% increase, how did you arrive at the 1% as what is necessary in order to ensure that we can continue to meet all of these demands?
Yeah, so I guess it's because of the fact that we use reserves to pay for any of our capital expenditures, and if we can offset, if we can receive grants, and we receive that, so that basically the rates do not pay for capital on an annual basis. So that in that way, we can try to keep our rate structure fairly flat and just slow growth over a period of time. I had outlined, I think, in one of the slides with respect to sewer, we had drawn fairly heavily on the sewer reserve in the last few years. So that was a conscious decision. We knew we were going to draw on those reserves, and they were getting down to a level that was a bit concerning. So we're growing those reserves over time and building them back up again. And taking a look ahead at what Adam has outlined in the plan and where we're kind of going for a 10-year plan, we will be able to build those reserves up. And yes, reserves are drawn out and then we put them back in and we have that level. So that's a big piece, is proper reserve management with respect to capital program. The base contract for PUS is 1 up 3%. The contingencies are the area that we have some flexibility on, and we try to use a historical average of how many water main breaks we'd have in a given year. And so we may have 3 breaks, and we, say $7,000 a break, we might budget $25,000. I know that we had a break last year that pretty much would make that go away, right? So in other years, maybe not so much. And so that's where some of the flexibility comes in, and some of the historical costs that we put in place. And of course, when we look at flat rate amounts of 1%, the 1% also applies to any metered accounts we have as well. So any of our commercial and institutional accounts which have meters, and some of our industry as well, and those different arrangements there. So that's all based on volume. So we can recover that amount as well. So it is definitely a balancing act, but it's we try to look long term and not just react year over year, but try to take a long term view to it as well. It's in keeping with our plans that we've put forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Black?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Thank you for the report, very thorough, and it gives us lots of great information, and your answer was around capital versus operating expenses was great. I appreciate that. One of the big expenses I don't think is covered by any of the grant is the generator replacement, which is about $131,000. And I echo Councillor Boyko's comments. We need a reliable generator, and it's time to replace it typically before it breaks down, but it still has a useful life. What will happen with that used generator? Will it go to auction, or do we have another building in the municipality that could use a backup generator that's maybe has a little gray hair on it?
Yeah. The generators that we had, there were 3 of them. We had one at Woodland Acres as well. It's identified under TSSA as being out of compliance. So that's why we kind of embarked on this whole episode with Peterborough Utilities. The generators that are existing were included in the tender price. So it's the responsibility of the contractor to take those generators away. We receive credits on the account for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I just wanted to comment. There are some townships in the county that have water and sewer, and they would die to be able to pay the rates that we do in comparison. For example, in Cavan, I understand people are paying $3,000 a month, some ridiculous amounts of money. So I'm happy that you are have got a handle on all of this, and as always are looking after our best interests and are tight with the wallet. Thank you. We're looking for a motion to accept the recommendation that's before us. Councillor Henry, Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much. We will move on now to refreshment vehicle licensing update. Robert?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the report that I have brought before council today, we're looking to update our refreshment vehicle licensing bylaw. We've brought before you a draft update of the bylaw, and we're looking for council to reflect and input any comments that you have into the bylaw, and we'll be looking to bring a final draft of the bylaw to you at a future meeting. The reason we're bringing this forward today is based on our experience and input we've received from property owners and operators. That the main body of the report highlights the predominant changes that we've proposed in the bylaw. They are highlighted in yellow for your benefit in the attached draft bylaw. A quick overview of the highlights. We've developed setback regulations for the placement of refreshment vehicles on properties. We've established the fee to be included in the tariff of fees bylaw. We've removed a redundant requirement for semi-annual inspections for gas or propane equipment installation. We're looking to revise and update the application forms to sort of reduce the onus on license holders that are renewing to make the process a little easier for them. We've introduced the ability to allow a license for an operator on municipal property, as well as open up the possibility for additional licenses to be held on properties outside of our settlement areas. We've updated the bylaw to include a clause to permit holders of event facility rental agreements for event holders that are utilizing our property to ensure that safety requirements are met by operators that they bring in lieu of being licensed by our municipality. And then we've included some requirements or sorry, the ability to utilize the township's inspection fees to assist us in enforcement when those matters become unnecessary. Essentially, we're asking you to review the proposed bylaw and provide any input at today's meetings so that we can move forward with bringing this back at a future meeting. And if you had any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Okay, before I go to my colleagues, what is can you highlight the date that you would like these comments back from the public?
So we have reached out to all of our existing license holders, as well as put the proposed bylaw on our website. So we're looking for comments back by next Thursday so that we can bring this forward preferably before we get into the season and we start getting new applications.
So May the 4th, is that the date? Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any questions? Councillor Koulis.
I just want to clarify for 4F, the use of portable generators are prohibited to operate a refreshment vehicle. Is this for long-standing site, right? It's not for like a festival. It's 1 or 2 days.
That's correct. That's for operators that are going to be set up either for an entire season or for the year.
Okay. And do you have a question, Councillor Boyka?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sanis, I'm looking at regulation 4B. And it says the township may elect to permit an operator on township property with a seasonal basis with express written permission from the bylaw enforcement officer. Has there been comment from restaurant owners who may not be pleased that we are allowing a competition with their operation on our township property? Have any restaurant owners been in contact about this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have not received any comments to date, but we only did have this information posted and sent out as of Monday.
Right. So how will restaurant owners in Selwyn learn about this change?
I could comment if you wish. We didn't reach out specifically to restaurant owners. So just in terms of the permitted areas where a food truck can operate, it is in a general commercial zone. So presumably any other type of restaurant could operate within that zone. So it is open for competition. On township property, I think this would be more relative to where we would permit, and I'll give you an example of last year. We had the Lions Club who wanted to operate their refreshment vehicle at the beach. They had been impacted by COVID, so it was a charitable organization. It wasn't intended to raise money for a business. So generally we don't permit refreshment vehicles on public property. We would look at that type of vendor. We also have community events where we have like the Jazz and Art Festival or the Shamrock Festival, where we would have vendors come in, and some of those might not be a charity or a not for profit. It could be a profitable food truck that's coming in for a one-off event. You will recall as well with the marina utilization study that we are kind of looking at that concept of having like a food truck park at either the marina, or it could be at another park location where it makes sense. And then that would be something that we would develop and probably open it up to some kind of competition where other businesses would have an opportunity to bid on it. So I think the intention around this is really to cover off those types of circumstances. In terms of the notice, we have a e-newsletter coming out for our businesses, so we could include the refreshment vehicle bylaw within that e-newsletter as well.
I would think that that would be a good idea. And the wording of B, which just says that we can elect to permit an operator on township property, tells me that we could allow John's hot dog stand to be on truck on Isabel Morris Park. And whether that would be a good idea or not in competition with downtown restaurants would be a question.
Yeah, and that is broad, and that does open that up. We do have facilities where we sell food at our community centers or at the marina. So we're in some ways we are competing with local businesses already.
Okay, I think my point's been raised. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have one before we leave this. There's nothing in the bylaw that speaks to the appearance of these food trucks, and some of them can look pretty ratty. Do we just allow anything to be put up and they can set up shop to sell hot dogs and French fries? Rob?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have regulations with regard to ensuring that the site is maintained in a cleanly manner and that we have trash receptacles and the like. We don't necessarily have any provisions about the appearance. Appearance is somewhat subjective, and I don't think it's appropriate that our regulations necessarily speak to that.
Yeah. Okay. I just think that sometimes I've seen one in our township that I drive by on occasion and think, oh my Lord, likens back to the 60s when, anyway, it's an old trailer that's been converted, and some of you might know what I'm talking about. But anyway, they aren't all created equal, and sometimes it can be detrimental to the landscape. I'm trying to be nice. So there's no way we can.
Perhaps the clerk can weigh in.
Angie.
Sorry. So I think Robert did speak about site cleanliness. I think in terms of the appearance of the vehicle, sometimes that solves the problem in and of itself. If people don't feel comfortable stopping there, maybe the refreshment vehicle will get replaced. So it does kind of inspire people to stop in or not. So it may be a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. Yeah.
And if I can follow up to that, Madam Mayor, so some of these questionable ones, they have to follow some high standards in their cooking wares and how the safety, cooking safety and everything else. So if they can't pass that, or they don't want to put the extra money in to new hardware, cooking hardware, it usually doesn't happen. So,
All right.
so
Thank you.
they don't get through too easy through either building or fire. So.
All right. Thank you. That's reassuring. Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through your merit. So again, Chief, with respect to the vehicle itself, it has to be the rolling vehicle. They can't pull an old trailer up and drop it there. It's got to be rolling, and it's got to pass transport and all those regulations, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it kind of has to be movable. I'm going to say the one that's maybe just getting corner township office here. It's kind of permanent, but it's
On a trailer.
So
yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So I need someone to move the recommendation that's before us. Moved by Councillor Koulis. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to joint council meetings. Ms. Chittick.
Thank you. So the report outlines a little bit of history about the joint council meetings. I don't think I need to go through all of that. We did have a pause on the meetings. So since 2019, certainly the pandemic had us focused on other things, and it made it difficult to meet as a large group. More recently, the municipality of Trent Lakes has initiated the suggestion to kind of get the joint meetings started again. And we've had some interest as well from the township of North Kawartha. So where we started out with 2 and added Trent Lakes, now we've got North Kawartha interested. So the staff did meet to talk about some timelines where we think that this could work best. And for the 4 communities, we felt that September the 28th, starting at 9 a.m. would be a good meeting for this year. We would try to organize it on that 4th. Now I forget the day of the week. I apologize. Thursday. Thank you. Every year, and we would rotate the meetings in each of the communities over the 4-year term of council. So Trent Lakes would be the first community to host. We would have it for a couple of hours in the morning between 9 and 11. And the opportunity really would be for community updates and information sharing, and to learn about each other. There may be a specific topic that we maybe would want to highlight, but generally that's what the purpose of the meetings have been in the past. So if council is agreeable, we would want to get a resolution to schedule this as a special meeting. I appreciate that everybody does have busy schedules. So, this is out there for everybody. We're not expecting that every council member might be able to attend the meeting. But if you're able to, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. And I cannot believe that the very first joint council meeting was Selwyn Trent Lakes, and Curve Lake was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies. I think that it's an excellent initiative to resurrect these meetings. If you recall, with our new council here, Chief Keith Knott was at our inaugural meeting, and he voiced that he would like to see these meetings recommence. So I think it's a great thing, and I'm in support. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through your Mayor Senes. Yeah, and I definitely support the resurrection of those meetings. I think, we have a friendship accord along with the county and a number of other townships with Curve Lake First Nations. We have a number of business things in connection with transit and so on. So I do believe it's definitely something that we should be resurrecting at this point. One of the issues that has come up in the past was with respect to Trent Severn and Parks Canada and their lake management plan. I think that encompasses Trent Lakes, ourselves, and Curve Lake, and I think that would be an ideal item for the agenda for the first meeting, is an update from Parks Canada on the lake management plan. The timing is perfect. It's the end of the summer. So they could give us an update on what's going on. with the lake management plan. I think the residents certainly in Innismore would be interested in getting some information as well.
Yeah, we would have to check with Trent Severn Waterway on that possibility to see if they would want to be included. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that to be looked at and requested. I think that would be, it's something that we affects all the municipalities, and you know, it's an opportunity to grow tourism and show some good faith between municipalities. There's been a lot of challenging times in the past. I haven't heard too much lately, but there's been a lot of challenging times around that issue, Walrice and Mahnomen, and I think it's to benefit all of us that we understand where Trent Severn and Parks Canada is going with the lake management plan.
Yeah, so we would just want to be mindful. North Kawartha maybe hasn't been involved in that. I don't know that it's an issue for them. So we do have 4 separate partners here. So we would want to be sure that all 4 partners agree to that. If they don't feel comfortable with that topic, it might have to happen in a different manner.
I would move North Kawartha to not attend, and if that's the case, I think we have a long-standing relationship here between the 3.
Well, I think we could definitely, we can, it doesn't, I think we have a joint meeting has been agreed to by 4 communities. If those 4 partners didn't want to have that topic on there, I think we have to respect that all 4 partners have to be respectful of the agenda. All I'm saying is if they aren't, then maybe we would have to look at something separate to that.
Perhaps Deputy Mayor Black, if we can't control when Parks Canada brings these reports back to us. So I would hate to see our moving forward, having this joint meeting be put aside for one subject. If we can't have that happen at that meeting, perhaps we can arrange another meeting for the townships that are involved.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sensor. Again, yeah, I think that we have 5 months between now and that time. And I'm not asking for any kind of a special meeting or a final lake management plan, but where are they with their plan? They have a plan, and to present to the public exactly where they're going, what they've achieved, and where it's going in the future. So the residents in Innismore and for our side of it, our township at least, have an understanding of what their long range plan is to make sure that communication is getting out there. From what I understand, it's not being well communicated at this point. So I think that's the place to do it.
Yeah, so for sure, Parks Canada knows that we're interested in being kept up to date on what's going on with regard to this matter. As you know, the discussions on the lake management plan, in particular the wild rice matter, it's really seen as a nation-to-nation discussion between Parks Canada, the Government of Canada, and Curve Lake First Nation. So we really don't want to get in the way of that. And we would need to work with Parks Canada if there was anything for them to update, whether it was at this meeting or at a council meeting. They know that we're interested in that information, but we do need to be respectful of the process that they're working through in terms of trying to develop a plan around that issue.
Again, through you, Mayor, I'm just asking for what information they can make public and bring residents up to speed on where they are with the process. I think that's the challenge. I'm not asking them to come up with anything specific, but where are they and what's their timeline for managing it? I do understand it's not a municipal issue, but we have a lot of taxpayers that have had some challenging times with it, and as well as the residents of Curve Lake have had challenging times around it because it's had a big impact on those relationships, unfortunately. And I want to make sure that everybody's getting as much information as they can so they understand where it's going moving forward.
Yeah, and for sure. And we have, very clearly expressed that council would like to see the residents' concerns taken into consideration as part of the process. And in conversations with Parks Canada staff, I understand that they do, and not regularly in the terms of every month, but frequently reach out to the residents group and provide some updates. So we would hope that they would continue to do that. And when the timing's right, when they have some information to share, I'm sure they would come forward. It's just we aren't in control of that timing.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through Mayor Senes. I believe the topic that we're on here is having a meeting with a group of us. By all means, historically, yes, there are some very challenging topics. I think seeing as we're just getting together for the first time over a number of years, and some of us are new to council, we could go in with the gloves off and just shake some hands at the start and work our way into this, because everyone's going to have a variety of issues that can come up. And I think that first, let's establish all the priorities before we jump right into that topic on the first meeting, because I think that could have an impact on what we're doing. However, in regards to the recommendation, yes, by all means, I support it because I believe all of us ran on this platform.
All right. So are you moving the recommendation in front of us, Councillor Henry?
Through Mayor Senes, yes.
All right. Seconded by Councillor Koulos. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Before we vote, Councillor Koulos has a question, but are you seconding it? Okay.
Can we just clarify? I recognize this is nation to nation, and I'm not trying to beat this down anymore, but maybe one of the key questions for this meeting, is it linked to duty to consult? Or is this just groups getting together?
I think for this joint meeting, it's for information sharing and fellowship. That has been the focus of those meetings. Yeah, we do duty to consult in a more of a formal way.
All right. So we have the motion moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Koulos. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I'm now going to pass the gavel to Deputy Mayor Black, so I can speak to and move the recommendation for the next item on the agenda.
We have item 14. Yeah, 14 is responding. So
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, I am bringing forward a report on the Pollinator Paradise Initiative and looking for Council to receive that report for information and also consider endorsing the launch of a Pollinator Paradise page on the Township's website. Selwyn Township has been actively working to support pollinators in the environment for many years. We've been designated as a bee city. We've worked to create pollinator gardens, do land naturalization and planting projects in the local area, many of which have been completed alongside our community partners and different organizations. And so the purpose of the Pollinator Paradise Initiative is really to showcase the many ways that the township has worked to support pollinators in the local area, as well as help increase education and awareness about ways that residents can also take action at home and in the community to support pollinators. So the township is proposing to launch the Pollinator Paradise page on the township's website on May 1st. And that page would include information on why pollinators are important, the actions the township has taken to date to support pollinators, and as I've mentioned, tips and resources for how residents can also get involved in this project in the community. That page would also include a Pollinator Paradise map, which would showcase some of the projects that the township has completed to date. It would feature some of our upcoming projects, and then residents would also be able to actually register their own pollinator gardens on that map to be showcased and highlighted along with the work that is being done in Selwyn Township. In addition to the launch of the website page, the township would continue to work with our community partners and organizations to support pollinator projects and expand this work in Selwyn Township. So that is all I'll say in summary of the report, and happy to take any questions.
any questions?
Thank you. Through you. I'm not going to take the time right now to talk about how important pollinators are to us, but suffice to say that they're responsible for about 30% of the human food supply. So they are really important. Selwyn, as Lily has mentioned, has been a leader when it comes to supporting pollinators by becoming a bee city, but the Pollinator Paradise Initiative would take it one step further. We already have made inroads with partnerships by creating some pollinator gardens in areas of the township, but this initiative would accelerate it by including further partnerships and encouraging residents to grow plants that feed the bees, the butterflies, and the birds. The pollinator page on the website, combined with the Pollinator Paradise map, can help encourage others to spread the word. Cities such as Amsterdam and Rotterdam are way ahead of North America by planting in verges or roads with wildflowers. I'm not suggesting we do this right now. These recommendations that are before us are baby steps. An article in the Council Communicator would be great to get the word out to those that don't have a computer and to give some education as to a listing of what plants attract pollinators. There are some residents in the audience today who have spearheaded the campaign by approaching local business owners to allow for small pollinator gardens where none exist now. It's something that will encompass the whole township. I think that residents will be eager to get involved, and I hope my colleagues will support this. And I would like to move the recommendation after they've all had a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Senes. We will take a seconder and then have comment. Okay, Councillor Boyko seconds. Further comments? Hearing none. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I'll pass the chair back to Mayor Senes.
Did I talk through all that with my mic off?
I didn't get note of that. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, right. Anyways, we'll move on to the next topic, which is 2023 Municipal Grant Recognition Awards. And are you speaking on Carla's behalf, Angie?
Yes, I can. So Carla Hope did prepare the report, but I'm happy to speak to it. Just a little bit of background. We've actually had this municipal grant program in place since amalgamation in 2001. It has been a very effective policy for council to manage requests from volunteers and not-for-profit groups who often request support from council members. We recognize that we've got a lot of great communities, groups and volunteers that do things in our community. We are also mindful that we do have we're using tax dollars to fund this. So Elaine always likes to say that we don't want to, fund all of these organizations and all of their operating costs on the backs of taxpayers. People have an option and a choice when they're making donations of a personal nature to donate to a charity or a group that they feel is worthwhile. But this program has been effective to manage those requests that do come into council. So it's not a great deal of money that we do have in the budget, but it is an amount of money that's been in there of $5,000. We do ask the eligible community groups to submit an application. We do take a look at their eligibility, and then essentially we take that full $5,000 amount and we divide it over the number of eligible applicants. So we don't look at each individual application and say, this one's probably better than another one. Don't really want to get into that kind of evaluation and analysis. And certainly not for the amount of money that we are providing to the groups. So the only item I did just want to point out is an application from the Bridge North Beautification Committee. They do have a bit of a difference this year with their application. They have a pretty strong cash position, which is new for them. They had an asset that they sold. That asset then has been invested, and they're using that interest income to help support their operations. So that is a little bit different, and did want to note that for council members, and are just asking council to confirm whether you do want to provide the municipal grant to them or not. But the list of all the other applicants is listed there. You can just let us know your feelings on the grant for the BBC. So essentially, if you approve all of the applicants, it would be a grant of $238. If you decide that you don't want to provide the grant to the Bridge North Beautification Committee, then it would go to $250 to the remaining applicants.
All right, thank you. And are there any questions, Deputy Mayor Black?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Sennis. Yeah, I mean, firstly, I want to thank all of these organizations and the other organizations that haven't, applied for the grant. It's amazing the number of volunteer groups we have in the municipality that, are all deserving of our appreciation and our support in many different ways. I've said for many years, I put my hand up to do a lot of volunteering for every dollar that they can get from a grant. The municipality is awarded 10 over with labor and other support that folks that are part of these organizations bring forward. And there's certainly quite a breadth of organizations that have applied this year. They, from social enterprises that have property and operations to small organizations that just want to plant some geraniums for us to beautify the township. So they all are worthy of our support. Unfortunately, the dollar amount is relatively small, and another organization I belong to, we applied for a grant last year and we're pleased to get it. We were fortunate to have some additional grants provided to us this year, so we didn't apply this year. Felt that the money would be better shared amongst the organizations that felt they needed it more than ours did this year. So, having said that, I wonder if it's we're at a time where we should reevaluate the program. There's no clear objective rationalization for denying the BBC grant this year, I don't believe. If you start analyzing one organization versus the other, our staff don't have time to do that effectively and fairly. So I think certainly for this year, having them included, I think is the right thing to do. Moving forward, should we be reviewing this policy and potentially asking some of the organizations on this list what is important to them? Would they rather have 5 organizations each get what's the math, Lane? 1,000 each. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I forgot what the total was. Would 5 organizations benefit more from $1,000 each versus 21 or whatever the number is at $238 each? So it may be an opportunity to have our first task force with some of those community members coming together and make some recommendations to the township around what is the most effective way, because basically this way anybody can apply and there are really no grounds to turn them down if they meet minimum criteria, right? So and also the dollar amounts, is there a way that we can add to that dollar amount to support more of them? So that's my thought out there. I would make a motion to approve all of them, and that we consider putting a task force together with some of these members to review the policy and make recommendations to council.
Would you mind if we separate those? So
Okay, sure, yeah.
let's deal first with what's in front of us.
Okay.
And I need a seconder. Councillor Boyko.
I will second, and I'm seconding that we approve the report with the BBC getting the $238, because as Deputy Mayor said, we would, if we were going to say no to them, we would have to look at each of them and say, how much money have they got? So have they come into a windfall lately? And we don't want to get into that. So I approve that BBC, I'm seconding the motion that the BBC is given the $238 and approve the report as written. But then reserving that I also want the discussion to carry on after if we approve this.
All right. Any other questions? Councillor Koulis.
Looking at the recommendations, anything like a letter or anything from us as well as the money?
They get a certificate, and the mayor typically attends the graduation ceremony to present it.
Okay. And then my other question too is, have we had an example where this has happened before? Do we have any lessons to learn from in regards to the BBC?
Not this specific circumstance. We've had applicants before that haven't met the criteria that we've essentially said weren't eligible. So we just didn't even advance them through the process.
Right. Any other questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is
No.
failed. So, I need another motion. Councillor Colas.
I just want to clarify. I'm pretty sure one of the options was that we redistribute it to everybody else on the list, correct?
That's right.
Okay, I'm pushing that motion.
So you're moving that they all be included with the exception of the BBC. Seconder? Councillor Henry.
I request a recorded motion.
Sure. All right. So we will, we've asked for a recorded motion on this. Recorded vote, rather.
Councillor Boyko,
Let me be clear. We are.
It's a yes or no, sir.
I know. So
Well-
can I have the motion reread? We are saying that
You
We're
want the
denying-
motion
denying-
reread?
denying
Okay.
the BBC
Yes,
and approving everybody else.
yes,
Because of the amount.
yes.
Because it's,
The amount that they already have for others.
All right. So you're
okay,
yes or no?
yes.
Okay.
Approved.
Councillor Kulis.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes, sorry, I have to
Still
ask
have
everyone.
to-
That's okay, no worries. Yeah. We haven't done many of these. That's okay. Councillor Henry. Mayor Senes,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Black.
No.
Motion is carried.
thank you. All right, and you
Okay.
want to,
I'll begin this discussion. I think this is a tremendous program, and I think that giving money to deserving groups in the township is something that we should do. And I think it is a valid use of taxpayers' money. But when I read this, I see that this program is outdated and needs to be updated. For example, giving money to TAS, I see where it came from. It came from they closed the Lakefield High School and the kids went to TAS. But there are kids from Selwyn who go to all kinds of different schools. And so we are making a mistake, I think, in only giving money to TAS. And $100 may have been a good idea a few years ago, but I don't think it would mean a whole lot to a whole lot of kids now. So we want to look at that. We need to look at the $20, I think, that kids who play on a winning team. Again, $20 may have seemed a substantial amount of money a while ago, but is that something we want to continue to do? And would it be better if we establish some kind of criteria whereby we said that a couple or 3 or 4 groups could get a substantive amount of money rather than $238, which I think is going to disappear into somebody's operating budget with nary a wink. So this is something that I think is valuable, but needs to be examined. So I don't know the proper process going forward, but I think that this would be a great test for a community task force, which we said we would establish when we wanted the community and staff and a couple of council members to look at a small project and come back with a report in a relative short period of time. This would be a great test for establishing a community task force to update this program. So I would support a motion that establishes such a task force.
you would move a motion?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And so,
I'll second the motion.
okay, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. Before we vote, we haven't done this before. This is new. So please, clerk, can you give some advice before we vote on this?
Yeah, so it would be a test of our new process.
Mhm.
So we'll just follow if council approves the motion and wants to move forward in this way, then we'll follow the our template and kind of go through the process and bring back a staff report.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Sorry. Janice is just reminding me, we were going to include it in the procedure bylaw, which we haven't actually done yet. Yeah. So, well, maybe if you want to move forward, I don't like, we've got a little bit of time. So we've got the procedure bylaw to be brought forward in Q2. So once the procedure bylaw is in place and that component is the development of the task team is added to the procedure bylaw, then we would do some of that work and probably bring a report back after the procedure bylaw.
Okay.
Great.
Everybody's with it. All right, so we have to bring it actually to a vote first, though. Is council all in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to consent items. Is there anything that anyone wants pulled out of the consent items that are before us? Councillor Koulos.
For you. And under the Peterborough County Peterborough County report, I just had a question. Do I wait? Okay.
No, if what is it you want pulled in, then we
So
can
it's
get to
actually
it.
very confusing, so that's why I'm
Oh.
asking it.
All right.
There's a number of different municipalities across North America, and I think actually internationally supporting women in politics, and I can't find anything on it, so I want to know what that is before I support that.
Okay.
And it's coming from the county, so I'm not sure who to ask.
Is it on the where is it in here, Mary?
Was it not in the county?
No, it's in the, it
Okay.
would be in the correspondence. Yeah, so
Under the
you're
township.
pulling item,
6A.
okay, well, you can pull one of them. So pick one to pull.
I think it's number 9 is one to support.
There 6A14 deals with it.
14.
Yeah, barriers to women.
Yeah, 6A14 and 15.
Okay, so we'll pull those. And before we go to them, is there anything else that people want pulled?
I'd
Councillor
like to pull
Boyko?
5A, please.
5A. Okay. Hold on. Which is helping homebuyers protecting Thames plan?
No, this is the procurement of the pickup truck.
Under consent item, like
Oh,
that.
under here, okay, gotcha. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so let's take a motion to approve all of the items that haven't been pulled. Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor, that's carried, thank you. We'll go to 5A first. Councillor Boyko.
Okay, through you, Madam, I almost called you Madam Speaker, Madam Mayor. To Adam and to Gord, one of the things that we are trying to do is to reduce our carbon footprint in order to meet our climate goals. And so when I see the pickup truck procurement process, which I feel for, because trying to get people to respond to an RFP is an interesting process. Has there been consideration and will there be consideration going forward to looking at electric vehicles?
At this point, on the fire side, and I'm going to say probably on the roadside, no. Strictly because of the different way these are work trucks and they perform, where now I've studied it a lot, and there's actually fire trucks out there that are being produced like pumpers, and they have just the first one was in California last year, and they've already had issues with long-term on scene where they've run out of power. So part of the problem is too with the fire or even a roads truck that you don't know when they're going to be out. With electric vehicles, somebody's going to town or they're going to work coming in, they've got all night to plug it in. We don't have that option. So we could be out and then come back in, plug in for 2 hours, and we could be out all night long. And again, too, if we go to scene, we need those lights. Well, there would be extra power used for lights and siren and everything else. So we need those emergency lights on. So here's another draw that's going to take on that battery. And again, also, if we're in the winter time, we're on scene, firefighters get cold, we need to get them in trucks. Could be victims of a motor vehicle accident or a victim from a house fire or any emergency at all. There's a lot of times they're in our vehicles to keep warm. So again, with an electric vehicle, you're losing power in the winter time to keep it warm because it's using battery power. And again, in the summertime, and again to winter and summer, you're losing anywhere 70 to 41%, depending on that weather range, because you've got to keep that battery consistently warm. California one, see, so. Yeah, it's, I'm going to say 10, 15 years from now, when they may have batteries that will work. That will, you know, optimum power and storage and usage, but at this point, and lithium ion scares me to death. So that's another area. That's fine.
If I could just add to Gord's points, we are looking at it and we do look at it, you know, continually kind of review that, but the technology is just not there yet. When we look at the light duty trucks that are on the market now with Ford and some of the other hybrids that are coming on, the range on those trucks is great if you're throwing your groceries in the back of your truck or your hockey bag. But when it comes to actually working with the truck, the 3/4 ton we're looking at for public works is going to be used for plowing. Some of the reports are saying that towing a vehicle alone or towing a trailer with those trucks, it'll cut your range by 40, 50, 60% alone, right? So we're continually looking at it, but I don't think the technology is there really to meet our needs right now.
Okay, thank you.
Future. Right. All right. Can I have someone move that item 5A? Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor? That's carried. Now we'll move on to 14 and 15 in our correspondence report. Councillor Koulis.
I was just curious what this is. Like it's unclear. It's just passing. And I was just trying to Google it and I couldn't find anything. So some clarity on what barriers to women in politics and how municipalities are supporting that. What does that mean?
I can try to answer that. There was an original resolution that was passed by the Township of Grimsby, and then it got circulated around to a number of municipalities. So you'll find that as things go through agenda cycles, they'll support things and then it gets circulated out to other municipalities. So that's in part why you see this come up over a few agenda cycles. If you remember the presentation, and I'm not professing to know all the impetus around the resolution itself, but the impetus or the presentation from John Mascarin, where he talked about councillors not being an employee of the municipality. So you don't necessarily have some of the protections that an employee would have under certain legislation. So I suspect that's probably the impetus around it to create some legislation for political members who are women and we're trying to achieve some of these goals.
And thank you. And actually 14, the Township of Clearview has the motion in full. And it talks about misogyny and things like that. So do you want to put a motion forward that we support the Township of Clearview in their motion? Yeah.
I just worry about using the word woman. So part of me feels like I'm not sure.
Yeah. All right. So not trying to push you. I didn't want to have you lose the opportunity, but if you're not comfortable, fine. That's good. All right. So we still have to pass the those particular things on the correspondence report because we pulled them. So can I have someone move to Councillor Boyko, Councillor Henry, all in favor? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes, that's right. All right. We're moving on to other new and unfinished business. Does anyone have anything? Seeing none, we are going to go into closed. I need a motion to do that. Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor? That's carried. We'll meet in the other room. Are we staying here? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, council, we have a motion with regards to council board and committee appointments. Who's making that motion? Brian Henry, Councillor Henry, and seconded by Councillor Boyko, and that is to appoint.
I can list them. Tom McAllister, Steve Gabbard, James Forrester, Terry McQuitty, and Valerie Cook to the Heritage Committee.
Thank you. All in favor? It's carried. And Senior of the Year nomination. Who was moving that? Councillor, Deputy Mayor Black, Councillor Boyko to nominate Helen Young as Senior of the Year for Selwyn.
I so nominate.
Yeah.
I'll move.
Okay, all in favor?
We got a second, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did.
Okay.
That's carried. Thank you. Our confirming bylaw 2023-030. Councillor Henry, Councillor Coulis, all in favor. That's carried. And no motion to adjourn. Councillor Henry, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor. That's carried. Thank you.